If everyone could please lower your voices, please. Quiet down a little bit, please. We are in a room with some high acoustics and the
Excuse me one second,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Spindler, if you make one more animal sound, you're going to be thrown out. Do you understand? Thank you. One more, you're out. We got a busy agenda, and as the chair, I'm trying to be respectful for the chairman here, but more importantly, all the people out there that are here, that have been waiting here, that have filled out speaker cards, that have very important items before this committee. So one more sound, and you're out. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, that is Mr. Spindler you're talking about, Mr. Englander, our usual visitor here. So we'll start this meeting. This is the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. We've been joined by Councilmember Gilbert Cedillo, Councilmember Price, and Councilmember Englander. We will first go to the multiple agenda item comments cards. This section of the meeting is where individuals wishing to speak on more than one item, we allow these individuals to speak on those items up front in the agenda. I'm looking for those cards. Do you have them? There's none here? None today? None today. Interesting. That's a record. Okay. So we'll go to item number 3 and approve that on consent. If there are no objections. No objections? So ordered. Item number 4, approve that on consent if there are no objections by the committee members. Items number 7, we will continue to a date uncertain. That's a good date, says Mr. Englander. All right. So without objection, we will continue item 7 to a date uncertain.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
that item has a time limit.
Pardon me?
That item, number 7, has a time limit.
It has a time limit. Okay. So let me ask our city attorney. We've been asked to continue this item by the local council office. And do we have to give a date here, or what should we do?
You don't have, the Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office, you don't have to give a date, but if that's the expiration date and it goes past, then...
Do we have an expiration date?
Last day for council to act is January 6th.
January
Is
6th?
the last day for council to act.
Is that right?
Okay.
It's on item...
Well, let's do this. We will continue that item,
That's on an appeal
and
for a site. There was a
we are noting for the record that the last day to act on this item is January 6th. I'm sure the local council office and the applicant will talk this over before then. When do we have our first council meeting?
The 10th, January 10th.
I'm sorry, the plum meeting, January 10th. Okay. Okay, so does that complicate things? Is Council District 5 here? Any advice on this?
I apologize.
So we have an item that was going to be continued. The last date to act on this is January 6th. The first committee meeting we have of the year is January 10th. We have one more plum meeting next week. That's the last one of this year. So any suggestions as to how we proceed?
I think there's agreement with our office and the applicant of this project to have this item postponed beyond the 10th, or
Okay.
sorry, the 6th of January. So I don't know what that means from a process standpoint. So
You would have to get a written note from the applicant to our city clerk, and we'll work that out. For now, we're going to continue this item, and then if that note is given to our city clerk, we'll be able to extend the time to act. Is that correct?
Terry
City Attorney?
Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office, just to let the committee know there may be consequences to doing that with, for example, the general plan amendment, which I'm not sure the status of it now, but there are only a certain number of days to act, and then if council doesn't act, it's dead. We may have already passed that point. and there's no ability to extend that time period, so just
Okay.
with that caveat.
All right, well, let's do this. Let's continue this item to next week, and then in the interim, we will figure out procedurally, or would you suggest we continue it to January 10th and knowing that the deadline passes? What's your suggestion, CD?
I won't speak for the applicant, but I would imagine if there's a concern over timing, then I assume we'd have to schedule for next week and see if we can get, from a procedural standpoint, the extension beyond the 10th, or the 6th rather, handled, so.
You may already have a problem on the GPA on that, so I just talked to the applicant's attorney.
I'll leave that to them. but
Okay,
thank
we'll
you.
continue it to next week, and all those procedural requirements, we will, CD5 and my office and city attorney and city clerk will come out with the applicant.
We'll
Okay,
hash it out. Thank you.
thank you. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
you could move this committee report for an extension, and then, because you need mutual consent to extend the time limit.
yes, that's what I was suggesting, but the city attorney advised that if we do that, there might be some consequences to that that are not all that apparent right now. So with the abundance of caution, I have suggested that we just continue this for next week, and we could work those items out, and the city attorney could fully advise us of what those consequences may be in the interim. Okay. All righty. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we will continue to next week, item number 7. Item number 8. If you could read that into the record, please.
Item 8, Councilman, this is a CEQA appeal filed by Jesus Hermosillo from Unite Here, Local 11. It relates to the approval of, or a recommendation for approval of the MND for the project at 649 South Olive Street in CD 14.
Okay, we understand there's been a written notice sent in that this item, the appellant has withdrawn their appeal. In that case, we will receive and file the appeal. That'll be the action of this committee. Any objections? Seeing none, so ordered. Okay, number 9, can you read that into the record, please?
Item 9, Councilman, this is a CEQA appeal again by Jesus Hermosillo from Unite Here, Local 11. This project involves also a zone variance for a rooftop bar in CD 14.
Okay, again, we understand that the appellants have withdrawn the appeals. With that, we will move to receive and file the appeal. Any objections? Seeing none, so ordered. Thank you. Okay, so that leaves us with wow, you guys are ready for a battle here, huh? Everybody's leaving. That leaves us with item number 1, report from the Director of Planning. Welcome, Mr. Bertoni.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Weezer, members of the committee. Just one item I wanted to bring the committee up to speed on, which is our South Los Angeles and Southeast Los Angeles community plans, which are moving forward. And on this last Saturday, December 3rd, we had the first of 2 public hearings. At the last public hearing, we had over 300 people attend. So it was a very successful public hearing in South Los Angeles for the community plans. We're having another public hearing tonight, so at LA Trade Tech. We'll start at 5 o'clock tonight. So this is regarding the 2 community plans. We also have a draft environmental impact report, which is out for circulation, and the comment period for that will end on February 1st. So we're really excited about the interest we've had in the plans. For a Saturday morning meeting, 300 is a pretty good turnout, and we had a lot of comments from folks. So we're feeling really good about how we've been able to engage the communities.
Any other questions or comments? No? Thank you, Mr. Bertoni, for your report. We will receive and file item number 1 unless there's a card. No cards, so we'll receive and file that item. Item number 6.
Item 6, Councilman, this is a city attorney CAO CLA report relative to the issue of medical marijuana. So give you a synopsis of the reports, Councilman. Back on October 25th, 2016, your committee requested the city attorney to provide an opinion on the recently enacted Prop 64, which is the marijuana initiative known as the Marijuana Legalization Initiative, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. You also requested the CAO and CLA to report back to this committee on issues of land use process and the overconcentration of marijuana-related businesses. In regards to the CAO-CLA report, that report has been completed. It's dated December 2nd. Basically, the report provides an overview of issues requiring an environmental analysis. It also gives you best practices in regards to the regulation of marijuana businesses, and it also provides comprehensive analysis of land use concerns that you should take into account. We have provided maps in regards to every council district in the city, and also an attachment, a synopsis sheet that tells you within each of those maps the percentages as it relates to distinct type of land uses, for example, agricultural, commercial, manufacturing. Wherein we note manufacturing, those are industrial uses. This is helpful information because, as you know, under Prop D, basically the medical marijuana businesses, as we found in our findings in our report, are concentrated in two zones in the city, in the commercial zone and in the industrial zone. So that information is there for your purposes for each of the 15 council districts in the city. The city attorney report specifically answers questions as relates to Prop 64 and what land use controls the city can and cannot enact. City attorney is here to answer those questions. And also within the report, we have given you an overview of the recently enacted legislation that became law January 1st, 2016, known as the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. Representatives from CAO and CLA and the Chief Zoning Administrator are here in as much as under Prop D, there was no environmental clearance. Those businesses received a categorical exemption under CEQA. If you proceed with any land use control, such as a conditional use process, which we have alluded to in the report, it would have a cost. We roughly estimated the cost to the City Planning Department would be $900,000 in order to conduct a full environmental impact report. We need to know the appropriate zones wherein these type of businesses would be located, notwithstanding the fact that we noted in the report that under Prop D, most of those entities are located in the commercial and industrial zones. And the Chief Zoning Administrator is here to provide further information as to the cost that would be incurred by the City Planning Department.
Okay, thank you. We'll start off with questions and comments from the committee, and then we'll go to public comment. So we are both tracking this item as a policy issue for the City Council in our Rules and Elections Committee, as well as here in Plum. Plum is more focused on the land use implications with respect to marijuana policy for the city of LA. And as many of you know, we had a policy in place, or have a policy in place, with respect to Measure D or Prop D. But recently, with the passing of the MCRSA and Prop 64, the city's in a position to create a regulatory framework and enforcement component of the cannabis industry even further. We've, as a city, been working on this issue for some time, ever since the passage of 218, was it? 218? And a lot of my colleagues went through some times when it wasn't all that clear what the city should do with respect to medical marijuana. And now, as this is before us, I think we have to be methodical and thoughtful about how we move forward. And not do an about-face as we had done under the medical marijuana regulatory framework, as we did that several times at that time. This report in front of us today will allow us to begin with the lengthy conversation around the land use components of this industry. It's not going to be something that happens quickly. We can all agree that the systems in place currently are not operating to their full capacity, and all parts of our current process can be improved somewhat even under the medical marijuana regulatory system. For example, how long it takes to shut down those that are not Prop D compliant, and other components of the marijuana industry wasn't really fully thought of in Prop D as well. So this just definitely does give us an opportunity to look at this anew. And as an entire new industry is before the City of Los Angeles, I want to ensure that this process is done comprehensively in this committee, that neighborhoods are protected against over-concentration and over-proliferation of marijuana businesses, and that we have a equitable distribution of potential impacts in the City of Los Angeles, and that there is a fair and transparent process in the creation of our new policy. So with that, we could ask some questions. Mr. Mejia, will you answer the questions, or do we have the zoning administrator here to do
Either I can answer them, council member, or there's representatives from the city attorney, planning, and CAO.
Okay. The first one I have is with respect to Proposition 64. Can you walk us through what limitations it now places on the city in terms of land use controls and any new policy we may enact?
My understanding, Councilman, is that UMA imposes no limitations on the city's, any city's policy option to ban completely non-medical marijuana businesses. So that is the short answer. City attorney is here if you want to go into further details or more specific questions. Ms. Heather Aubrey from the criminal branch of the city attorney's office.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, committee. With respect to the Heather Aubrey, City Attorney's Office, with respect to any limitations placed on the council's policy options imposed by Proposition 64, it is indeed correct that the ability to ban, to prohibit entirely remains intact. With respect to regulatory limitations, a city cannot prevent the transportation of marijuana on public roads by a state licensee otherwise acting in compliance with Prop 64. So what that means basically is that the city cannot prohibit the passing through of the City of Los Angeles on city streets by a licensee in compliance with the AUMA. Of course, at this point, there are no licensees because licensing will not take place until January 2018 is the estimate on that. Secondly, a city shall not prevent the delivery of marijuana on city streets, which, by the way, is distinct from transportation. Transportation relates to licensee, so which is a strictly commercial transportation. Delivery is to essentially a customer. Okay, so that's different from licensee to licensee. But similarly, a city cannot prohibit the delivery of marijuana on city streets, meaning a city cannot prohibit passing through. The city can prohibit delivery altogether, but it cannot prohibit a passing through of the city on city streets. Okay, again, with the end user not being the final destination. And finally, local jurisdictions may establish standards and regulations regarding health and safety, environmental protection, testing, security, food safety, and worker protections that exceed state limits in these areas or state regulations, but cannot establish limitations that are less stringent. So basically, the state will set the floor in these areas. And those are essentially the regulatory limitations placed by Prop 64.
Great, thank you. And currently under Prop D, we've seen that the report says that most of them have located around commercial and industrial zones. And has an analysis been done as to whether this is the right location with respect to the quality of life issues or access issues for patience that we would like to see, or we just kind of let it happen and we haven't really been out there to see from a policy perspective whether it makes sense, the results we have from Pop D?
Well, there has not been an official study. That's the short answer. Hence the comment in the report that would require $900,000 to do that study. That's a rough estimate that the Chief Zoning Administrator's office provided us. So, and as far as where they're located now, they are primarily located in commercial and industrial zones. And as you recall, when Prop D was enacted, there were distance requirements from sensitive uses. So that has been the end result, but an official study has not been completed.
So we enacted Prop D, and we have certain restrictions such as certain distance requirements from sensitive uses, other requirements that they can't be in close proximity to one another, et cetera, et cetera. And the result has been, what we see is primarily they've located in commercial and industrial areas. And we probably foresaw that at the time when this was enacted. So now, in order for us to further understand whether that makes sense or not, or where the impacts would be with the new framework that we assume is going to have a higher demand for marijuana, even if it's now that it's recreational, we would need additional study to look at what the impacts would be on the different zones throughout the city, and determine what that would mean, and kind of foresee or forecast what the results will be, correct?
Correct. And Lynn Wyatt is here, and she can go into further detail as to that request.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Lynn Wyatt, Chief Zoning Administrator. Roberto is correct. Essentially, a land use study hasn't been done specifically in regards to the immediate changes based under the current Prop 64 passing and some of the other state law changes. And so in regards to that, in order to reflect changes to Prop D, we would have to pursue an additional land use analysis. That analysis would look at those sensitive use issues again and look at the relationship to both the commercial zones as well as the industrial zones and also residential proximity. But all of that would have to be based on current data. The data that was used for Prop D is dated now in 2009. So the department is prepared to pursue that. We're already doing some analysis on other work program items that we could incorporate some of that. It would entail some additional time as well as staffing. We prepared a separate analysis. The $900,000 that Roberto identified is actually in relation to doing a conditional use permit and setting up a separate specialized unit in the Office of Zoning Administration to pursue those permits. To do the land use analysis, we prepared a separate supplemental analysis this morning. That would encumber approximately $500,000. It would take the department probably at least 3 months in order to prepare that analysis and to at least do a cursory review citywide of those particular commercial and industrial areas and the sensitive uses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And with respect to permitting, in the report you identify 3 approaches to processing applications. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a first-come, first-serve approach versus a lottery system?
I think the short answer, Councilman, is one of volume. So basically, if you do a cutoff and you say, this is the deadline to submit an application, you control the volume. Versus if you do it on a lottery system, you have a definite number of applicants. So Jason Kylene here is from the CAO, and he can discuss that further.
Here we go.
Good afternoon, Jason Kylene, Office of the City Administrative Officer. One of the benefits of the first-come, first-served basis is all applicants have the same opportunity to apply for an application within the city. Given the size of the city and the number of development services offices that we have throughout the city, the ability to apply for applications online, it may become problematic where you have applications coming in with the same timestamps. If we were to limit it to one location in the city, we'd probably see people camping out in advance of the applications being accepted to the city. So there should be some kind of vetting mechanism in place to determine how many applications we would actually go through. And with the first come, first served basis, if we do have land use protocols in place that limit it to specific zones and proximities from sensitive uses as well as different businesses, the acceptance and approval of one application may invalidate another application because the application is no longer a viable location. So you may have two businesses on the same block applying to operate, and the first one to actually get approved would disallow the second from going into business in that block. With the lottery system, the city would have to be careful to ensure that concrete methodologies were determined to actually determine how the lottery would be conducted. The city of Santa Ana had very minimal restrictions in terms of the lottery, where somebody had to file an application and pay $1,600, as well as to have site control either through owning a parcel or through a lease. And what they didn't do is actually go through the applications to determine how many of those applications were using the same physical site. So what you had is you had a number of businesses win the lottery that were tied to the same physical location. So you immediately had challenges that the process was rigged from applications that did not actually make it through the lottery process. So we'll have to have some, if we were to use a vetting process, it would be very important to determine what the concrete criteria are, and then establish some kind of vetting process to ensure that the applications that were going to enter the lottery had met all of the city's requirements. So as we proceed forward, it would be a good idea to ensure that the options are laid out in detail to this committee, as well as having them vetted by the city attorney's office in terms of legal defensibility.
Great, thank you. And so that's kind of at the, so do we have any empirical data with other cities that have tried either approach and looked at how they have worked?
Yes, sir. So the jurisdictions that would allow for it are typically inundated with applications, and what you typically see is a lot of speculation in the marketplace where people enter to try to get an application to sell that application later to a business that actually wants to conduct that type of business, or you actually have individuals who apply for the license to try and prohibit other people from entering a specific location so that that activity doesn't go on. In Denver, where they actually licensed medical marijuana dispensaries, what they did when recreational sales were allowed was they limited the application process to existing licensed businesses, and they had a moratorium on all new license applications for 1 year. Unfortunately, since the city doesn't give a permit to the existing Prop D dispensaries, it would be very hard to determine which were authorized under Prop D versus which were not.
Thank you. Any other questions on the permitting or system approach or land use controls? And let me just ask if there's any questions generally. I have some others, but I'll hold off for now. Mr. Englander, and then I'll go to Mr. Hurstos.
Great, thank you very much. First of all, a number of questions. I know when we first went down the road on Prop D, there wasn't a lot of clarity, and there was sort of learning as we went along with it. And I think the city of LA and our residents woke up one day to find we had more medical marijuana facilities in the city of LA than we did coffee shops or ice cream parlors, well over 1,000. And that was by no means the intent. In my district alone, we had over 100. Today, I believe we have 3. And with that, and it took a lot of work to get that down to manageable size, whatever that size might be. But in looking at all of this in recreational use, and I wanted to explore a couple things. One, under Prop 64, it's my understanding that we have a number of options. And as it was outlined, we have the ability to regulate health, safety, environmental protections, testing, security, food safety, and worker protections that exceed, that's key, state standards, with very little limitations in terms of who transports through the city if they already have a state license, and or home growing your own as long as it's indoor and secure. That's essentially what it is. Okay. Having said that, in terms of going through a process and figuring that out, we have some time, and I think we're going to need it. This is going to be pretty extensive and detailed. In fact, I'm already thinking of peeling off a section that won't relate to process, planning, or land use, but just that deals with the security element and getting into the details in public safety and moving that over perhaps to that committee that talks about live scan, video feeds, all of the things that we would never get into the details on in planning, although planning is probably the biggest discussion we've got to have in how we're going to move forward. So I'm already thinking of that and splitting some of these things off. Worker protection, certainly, and we have other committees that can deal with some of these issues. In terms of the zoning and planning, we do have some time. I mean, in fact, the state under 64 says the city can ban it outright. Do that right there. And the ones that are Prop D are done. We're done. It's that easy. Yeah, it's really that easy. I don't know that the will of the voters in LA is there based on the election results on 64. But having said that, we have that option. It also tells me that we don't have to have a date certain that says we have to get this done on January 1st, 2018, although I think we'd all like to. And we have some time, and it's going to take the time to get that done. One of the things you mentioned I found interesting as we start going through this and unfolding it is what Denver did. And they had a temporary ban on MRBs that weren't medical. So when they implemented the change in law, they said, well, this is going to be too big. And while they had another year for the implementation date, almost as if we do, they added a whole other year to say it's going to take us that long to get through this. We'll deal with what we've got, and then we'll expand out, which is what they did, right? Is that correct? In Denver?
Yeah, the licensed medical marijuana dispensaries were allowed to expand into recreational sales before new businesses could apply for recreational licenses.
Correct. And so with that, we have, I think if we could look at some steps in the process and create some steps in the process to get there, rather than just look at, overall the city and zoning, or right now we know they're an industrial, or right now, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. First, I think we've got to build some stepping stones so this doesn't get out of control, because this, as we saw last time, very easily could, and a lot of people are very interested in this. And what are the first things we need to do in terms of evaluations and looking at best practices? I think looking at additional studies of best practices. For best practices, we literally have like 4 bullet points on one page. So a comprehensive analysis or report back is one of the first things I would suggest, is we can learn from what other people have, what they've done in this space. Solving the problem on temporary barriers or permits. We don't permit our Prop D. So I don't know if there's another way to look at that. One of the things we went down the road on was business license and not issuing businesses license unless they're Prop D compliant. I don't know if we've ever solved for that equation yet or not.
That's one of the things before the committee is, since the city has not previously licensed and or permitted this activity, if the city does not license these activities and these businesses, when the state's licensing system goes into place, none of the existing businesses will be able to apply for a state license under the Medical Cannabis Act. So as a precursor to applying for a state license, you have to hold a local license and or permit. Therefore, any of the Prop D businesses that are Prop D compliant would not be legally allowed to do business within the city without that permit. So there is a time frame for the city to act, because effectively the businesses that currently do business would not be allowed to apply for a state license if we don't actually issue a permit or license.
Okay. So that's good to understand. And maybe that's the first step that I would suggest, is looking at, is there any type of licensing mechanism, whether it's with the police permit panel or some other means, to say, well, let's first start with the ones we have that are Prop D compliant and issuing a license, because we know who those operators are. And I guess that might be a first step, rather than casting a wide net, saying, how many do we want to start with? And maybe that's and I don't know, and that's the discussion point that we could have, is would that then be a next step into saying they should be or could be the first since they're already here and operating and in compliance. And assuming they're in compliance. At that point, we can also have discussion, a parallel discussion on the security measures for that permit, as an example, because we don't really have those in place so much today. And we can get that wrapped up quickly and then have a temporary ban if we wanted to follow like the Denver model as an example. Would that be an option if we went down that road?
Yes, sir, that would be an option.
Okay. All right, I'm going to hold my time and come back to it.
Thank you, Mr. Englander. And that's precisely the type of question and discussion we want to have so that we come back on this item. We have a full, wide range of options, and we get the data and information before us before we move on a framework for this. Mr. Harris-Dawson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Englander for your comments. This is a very complex issue, extremely complicated with lots of moving parts and lots of objectives that we want to get to. We want to carry out the will of the voters on the one hand. We want to have land uses that make sense in neighborhoods, and so we don't want to have over-concentration in one area. We don't want to have a dangerous crime magnet businesses like we see. And then we've got this other really big, glaring, bright light issue of all the marijuana shops, supposed medical marijuana shops that are operating at this moment in our city that are not Prop D compliant. Most voters believe that's illegal, except that when you try to do something about it, it isn't quite so clear. It seems a little bit more legal than driving without registration or a host of other things that we have no problem enforcing in the city. And so I'm just trying to be clear about the licensing process. The licensing process has been described in a way to me that I understand it to mean once we have a licensing process, anybody operating without that license, medical or recreational, will be out of compliance and flying in the face of the law. Is that correct?
If the city has a formal licensing process, it will become a lot easier to compel illegally operating businesses to shut down than it is currently without actually giving somebody a license. You are correct, sir.
So as an example, I have 132 dispensaries in Council District 8, of which 4 are Prop D compliant. And so the licensing by itself would take care of that problem.
The licensing would simplify the process for LAPD and the city attorney's office to compel somebody to shut down.
And so that's the licensing thing. And then there's the second way of managing this activity, and it's zoning, right? So we're saying that we could do a study. The study would cost almost $1 million.
If you did it by conditional use, but the chief zoning administrator chimed in and she said that actually the cost would be $500,000. If
so
we
$500,000.
Yeah, $500,000.
So $500,000 to do a study that at the end of which what would be our expected deliverables from that study? What would we know coming out of that study?
Well, I would imagine that you would have community engagement and participation. They would basically be able to say what zones in the city would be appropriate, which ones are not. So to the extent that you get the community to participate, that would be an added value.
So you're saying it would be an assessment of stakeholder opinion?
Yes.
Okay. I'll move off of that for a second. The third question was about just a technicality about this business of lotteries. So you talked about the various problems with the lotteries and addresses. Has any city done a lottery where all of the threshold questions that you raised are taken care of before there's an entry into the lottery system, so that there is site control, you have a lease on that, or the sole right to use that property for this purpose for the next year or 5 years or whatever the term may be, before people are allowed to enter the lottery, and that way you don't end up with a situation where you have 25 applicants from one address?
I'm not aware of a formal lottery process that has kind of been defined that's bulletproof and 100% legally defensive, but in talking with the county and other local jurisdictions, we do have a working group in terms of identifying what a lottery system could look like, where we had concrete requirements to actually be considered a participant of that lottery that could be validated by staff, and we're working on that currently. But everybody who's done it so far has been challenged legally.
And then one last question, and I'll relinquish it back to the chair. Any of the folks who've been studying this, I'm interested in Colorado and specifically, this business creates a hazard risk because of the disagreement between the federal government and various state governments and the sort of prohibition against using banks and credit cards and all the rest. It creates a cash business. Creates an opportunity for very, very violent and disruptive crime to happen in and around the shops. What mechanisms have other jurisdictions used to deal with that challenge?
The city could actually, as a requirement or a condition of issuing the permit, require some kind of non-cash management system within the business. Typically, when the city finds that a parking operator is not remitting the appropriate taxes to the city, we require them to put in these payment card systems where they don't actually handle cash so that we have access to the auditing information. I know the jail system actually uses it within the jails so that people can basically load up a card and that card can be used on vending machines and other things. So that's one option available to the city, which would be to require a business to contract with some kind of company that provides preloaded cash management systems so that somebody would load a card and then come in and do the transaction so there's no cash changing hands, and then the city would have access to those audit records, and it would ensure that we're getting not only the appropriate amount of business tax receipts, but we would also be mitigating some of the security risks associated with these types of business because they would not have large quantities of cash on hand.
Last question, and that is the conditional use process that was raised as a possibility here. Certainly makes a lot of sense from the point of view of a policymaker, certainly as a council member, because people are going to hold you accountable for where these places are, except right now there's not really a process for you to manage or even comment on that. Conditional use permit process would do that. Here's the thing I worry about with the conditional use permit process. The ones I've seen now take at least a year, and you pretty much got to hire a lawyer or a firm to help walk you through that process, and that eliminates a lot of small businesses, a lot of minority businesses, a lot of the people who've paid the price for our drug policy and now are in a position to take advantage of the change. That knocks them out of the box. So do we have in the city something short of the conditional use permit process that allows for comment, allows for input from the community, but doesn't take a year and require a firm to help walk you through?
One of the processes the city has is for massage parlors, where the state actually imposed license restrictions for licensing employees. And if the massage parlor has licensed employees, it's more of a by right process, where as long as you meet all the conditions, you're issued the permit. However, it does leave it open to businesses that don't meet the requirements and have licensed staff on hand, and it does allow for a discretionary process.
Right, but that doesn't take care of land use. That doesn't take care of where it is. Am I right? The way I'm understanding you to describe it.
Well, where the business can be located is part of that land use
Part of
component.
the process.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilman, if I may make a comment, in the report, we also noted that the city could also create a separate city entity that would administer the permitting process, and that's an option out there.
Thank you.
Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for setting the stage and hoping to continue to provide a forum to dialogue on this. We appreciate the efforts of the staff, and I think we've benefited from best practices in other areas. I think that's important for us to take advantage of. Related to that, some jurisdictions have sought to address the equity issue in licensing by creating some mechanism to provide opportunities for everyone from those formerly incarcerated to those who may be of a ethnic or racial minority. Any thoughts about the role of equity in the licensing process, the licensing procedure, looking at what some other jurisdictions are doing, notably Oakland, but not only Oakland? Is there some hybrid, some mid-range approach that addresses that concern in a way that's fair to everyone?
Councilman, Deborah Choi in the CLA's office actually wrote a memo for the Rules Committee on the equity issue, and I'll ask her to answer your question.
Good afternoon, council members. Deborah Choi with the CLA's office. Yes, there are cities that I guess embed the equity and social justice concerns into their permitting process. One example would be the city of Oakland. They have a equity permitting process that includes those kind of provisions in to actually
Has it been working or just being implemented now, or what? Could you help us identify some of the requirements in the Oakland experience, for example?
Right. So far, there hasn't been too much. Yeah, I'm sorry. Our office can get back to you on that.
I just think that's a discussion we should be having, as has taken place in other communities. Again, we don't want to pick winners and losers. We just want to create a level playing field and an opportunity playing field. And again, as we embark upon what everyone agrees to be a multi-billion-dollar business opportunity, we want to make sure that everyone's involved, even those who may have paid the price earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Price. Okay. One other question that I had is on the method used by the state's Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control in determining over-concentration limits within cents and tracts. Is that something that was looked at here?
No, but I think what you're referring to is to the ABC process that the state uses, and they work hand in hand with LAPD to regulate the overconcentration of alcohol. But we did not extensively look at that issue.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Englander?
I'm going to ask if we could maybe take a step back for the next meeting and begin a discussion before, I think, getting into this, which we're already there. Figure out what we have now. What's the current inventory? What are we dealing with, what we have in terms of Prop D and non-Prop D? I haven't heard numbers in a while. To hear that one district alone has over 132 still to this day, and maybe 4 are Prop D compliant. And oh, by the way, those 4 don't even have a permit or license from the city of LA. So we really haven't, we never finished dealing with that from my perspective. And I think we've got to fix that before we start adding on to this sort of house of cards. So if we could, if we could do it by the next meeting, great. As soon as we could have city attorney, planning, perhaps LAPD come back to this committee, and it may have been something that potentially we'll have to get city attorney opinion on, if we should agendize for a possible closed session, depending on certain actions that may or may not be taken or information shared, because a lot of these may not be in compliance. and it doesn't sound like they are. I think we've got to deal with that issue quickly and figure out, is there a permitting process for the ones that are Prop D compliant now? Will that give tools to both LAPD and the city attorney, if we have that in place, to then shut down the ones that don't have that permit? Because we've been wrangling with this, whether they have a business tax or not. And then, oh, by the way, since we haven't, the Department of Finance hasn't sent the business tax notifications out for last year, there's, from the numbers I've heard, $30 million that haven't been collected because even the ones that are Prop D compliant aren't getting the notifications to pay their taxes. So this whole thing is really a mess. So maybe if we step back a little bit, and before we get into all of this, start dealing with cleaning up what we've got now, and maybe that'll help us along the conversation in how we're going to expand this to be compliant with 64, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I know that the criminal branch of the city attorney's office, they are very much involved in the shutting down of those dispensaries that are illegal.
Well, I know they have, but we haven't gotten any report. But in fact, we may even want to bring this to the whole council and have a full discussion with LAPD, the city attorney, planning, and figure out where are we with Prop D? Where did it leave off? We still have numerous complaints from neighborhood councils. We still have, it's still what we call whack-a-mole. Why we might have 3, we've got to shut one down every other week. I mean, the ones that are out there that say they're Prop D compliant don't have a permit with the city of LA because we don't have a permitting process. So I think maybe it's stepping back just to take a breath for a moment and figuring out where we're really at in the regulatory environment within the city of LA and what we already have on the books before we even take it further to comply with all these new rules and regulations that we're going to load onto it, which really becomes and in the effort to try to avoid litigation in this whole thing as well. So I would propose that if I could, and I'll defer to the chair on this, whether you'd want to bring this into the full city council for a meeting and figure out where we're at, or you want to just do it here. I'm open. Either way, I get the benefit of the discussion. I think there are a lot of members very interested in this issue before we take it to the next step as well. But that's my suggestion.
Thank you. Let me confer with the council president, who's been diligently working on this in Rules and Elections Committee, if we should move to full council before I ask for that. He may have some other ideas as to what direction we're going with this. But with respect to land use issues, we certainly want to take those up here. And we're at the very beginning of this, where we have to get additional information, analysis. And I like your idea of looking at what are the impacts of Prop D, where are we, what does the framework look like if we permit them versus, just going full-blown to just anybody. That's the type of analysis we need, but from a land use perspective. But I do want to point that out with a caveat that the misstep we took last time when we were coming up with a regulatory system for medical marijuana dispensaries is that it was land use driven, and our policy on marijuana for the city should not be land use driven. It's a component of it, a very important one, but we shouldn't drive it. This is just one approach and analysis that we're getting back to then speak in conjunction with rules and elections and the rest of the council to see what's the public safety component and what's the overall policy. So with respect to land use, it would be interesting to see what the Prop D component is with respect to land use impacts, and also what a permitting system will look like if we expand from that, as suggested by Mr. Englander. What we had hoped to do today, Mr. Englander, is to ask for those types of report backs along with some of those land use impacts, and we could have that meeting here again and start off with that. I think that's a very good suggestion. And so if there's any other questions, unless there is, I'll give some direction. Okay, well, my suggestion would be that we come back, report back with options for provisions and zoning regulations specific to marijuana-related uses, given the report you provided today as an offshoot, and also to report back on what the Prop D impacts would be and other related issues with respect to Prop D overall and what that looks like, and if we embark in any type of permitting system, what are the options that are going to drill down into those even further. But as we do that, we also want to take into conjunction with that, those are just some preliminary discussions that we're going to have again when we come back. But we do need to have an overall update and a report back on the scope of work with the deliverables for the analysis that we're asking you for. Because that scope of work is important to be it like our guiding document, that would, our map, if you will, to show us where we are going with all this, so that we don't just keep asking for report backs and we keep coming back. But that analysis that it gives you you will tell us what the scope of work is and what direction we're going, so that we kind of know, what's the end game here as you see it, and at what point do we have to have a decision point to say, hey, these are your options here, you have to decide on this and move in that direction, or whatever they may be, with respect to land use issues. And one thing that confused me a bit in this discussion was, we're approaching this is the Plum Committee, so we want to focus on land use issues, but the permitting and all that stuff, what that process looks like, we would love to entertain it here, but I think it's going to take a conversation, as Mr. Englander suggested, with a larger body and more ideas, other committee members, perhaps the whole council. We got to figure out how that works, because it's not going to be a plum directive on that.
So from what I'm getting, just to be clear, it looks like you're asking for three things. The zoning regulations, which we would need city planning to weigh in on that. When you say Prop D impacts, are we looking at, is a request one for data that you're looking at, as Mr. Englander suggested, looking at the universe where we are on Prop D?
Yeah.
And then
and existing conditions.
And the existing conditions, so we would need to work with city attorney's office. And three is the scope of work and deliverables. Those are the three things I got.
Yeah. And so on that first one, your scope of work, some of the reporting you're doing at the next meeting is really that scope of work. You could expand on it further later on, if you need to, but at least we want some preliminary discussions at the next meeting on that, so we could kind of a flavor of the direction.
And when are you thinking of having that next meeting, Council?
45 days.
And to Councilmember Harris Dawson's point earlier about kind of the permitting process, the city really doesn't have a good permitting process that really addresses all of the concerns that have been addressed in this committee and the Rules Committee in terms of equitability and ensuring that we have the appropriate land use provisions in place and people have kind of a buy right versus you have the public hearing process. So it really would be important for city staff to come back with a menu of options for current processes, as well as how those processes could be utilized to create a new hybrid process that kind of addresses the issues that have been raised here, as well as in Rules Committee.
Okay. And as far as the entities that you want to report back, Councilman, on this, on the zoning, on the would it be planning, city attorney, Cio Cla? What are you thinking?
All hands on deck.
Okay. Everybody together.
Everybody.
Okay.
CAO, CLA, city attorney, planning department. Bring in building and safety.
Building and safety. Office of Finance.
Yeah. I see some joint committee meetings in the future. Maybe with public safety, as long as we don't break quorum as a council, and the election government, Herbs Committee. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your attention to this matter. We will now go to public comment. And again, I want to just acknowledge that this is very preliminary at this stage. So we have not really set any direction that we're going on with respect to, but we wanted to just start the conversation. Tomer, and each person in this committee has 1 minute. Tomer Graysany, David Sparrow, Eric Holstrom.
Hi, my name is Tomer Graciani. Thank you very much for having me here. I wanted to talk a little bit about zoning, but actually hearing your conversation here, there's something else I'd like to talk. I'm hearing a lot of conflicts, if you will, within the council itself, specifically in regards to minorities and the report that you guys had on community impact. One side is saying, well, let's look at limiting the licensing only to existing Prop D businesses and setting up a CUP license that, as you said, is very, very expensive and time-consuming. I don't see how that would allow the conclusions of the report that says we need to open it up to diversify the market. Furthermore, specifically in the land use and zoning parameters, I'd like to think of it as if you're licensing these businesses, there's no reason why it would be any different than a pharmacy where there's pharmacies next to schools.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
David Sparrow.
How do you do? Good afternoon. My name is David Sparrow. I'm the COO of The Clear. We're a cannabis concentrate manufacturer in the city of Los Angeles. We operate under our own set of standard operating procedures, which are all in adherence to OSHA, FAR, FDA best manufacturing practices. We've self-regulated for a number of years, which is why you've never heard of us, because we're careful. But the reason why I wanted to speak with you folks is it seems to me that most of what I'm hearing discussed revolves around dispensaries. The manufacturing segment of this industry is a large segment. We employ a lot of people. Our average salary is $40,000 a year. We employ 27 people at our manufacturing facility. We have zero public access. We have a secure facility. You wouldn't know it's there if you drove past it. The public has no reason to go there. As such, current zoning, for instance, in manufacturing or industrial areas, would ensure that we are away from the sensitive areas. Thank you.
Eric Holstrom.
Hello. Thank you for the time. Thank you for taking up this discussion. I know this is all very preliminary. I would just like to hopefully get everybody to kind of look at the future and what the cannabis industry could represent in Los Angeles. There's obviously the retail side and the production side. I would prefer to right now address the production side. This is an opportunity to really revitalize a lot of our manufacturing and industrial zones in the city. So far, on polls of cannabis cultivators in the city, they make a living wage. They make over $20 an hour on average for the employees of these places. And so this is really a segment where we hope that Los Angeles, if it's done right, could dominate the entire state with this industry. Nothing more than I would love to see cannabis produced in LA going to the Bay Area and other California towns and getting their money and giving it to LA workers. Ultimately, I think this could be a great industry for LA, and I really hope that consideration for that moving forward takes place. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Eric Holstrom. Virgil Grant, and then Herman.
Hi, my name is Virgil Grant, owner and director of a medical cannabis facility, Prop D compliant pre-ICO in District 8. My concerns was we were talking about the 134, but the 134 doesn't address other businesses in the cannabis industry, manufacturing, cultivation, delivery service. So when you limit to those licenses, what do you do about those businesses? And yes, minorities need a stake in that part of the industry as well, not just the theater storefront. So I'd like to see that addressed a little bit more. As far as with the sensitive use, I'd like to see karate schools looked at, daycares. There's no kid that's going to crawl out of their crib and come to a dispensary. So let's kind of be a little more sensible about how we direct that and the sensitive use areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Herman?
Now, whether we're talking about sales here, are we addressing the issue with the federal law when it comes to the sales of cannabis? Not that I'm against it, because it can improve our lives. Look, it improved Weezer's life when he had his affair with Godoy upstairs, didn't it? Alcohol and drugs stimulate the mind, creativity, a progress of process. And let's not forget Herb Wesson's son, For all we know, he was
You're off topic.
drinking.
You're not on
and
topic. You're targeting
You're not the
specific
chair.
council members.
Shut up and let
You're
me finish
using
my
the
one
time.
goddamn minute.
Mr. Herman.
I got 21
Mr.
seconds.
Interrupting the meeting by not
Shut
being
up.
on topic. You're
I'm not
disrupting the
done.
meeting.
Quiet.
You're
Mr.
going to be
Harmon.
asked
Quiet.
to sit down.
Quiet.
You're going to be asked to sit down.
I got 21 seconds.
And you're wasting everybody's time by not staying on topic.
I am on topic.
No,
I'm
you're
talking
not.
about drugs.
No, stay on topic.
Talking about alcoholism. I'm talking about the manufacturing of two items that
let me address you.
impact
Herman,
the thinking capacity.
You've got to stay on topic, and you do not address a member of this committee that way. You come here every day, and I repeat that just for people who are...
I'm here today, brother.
Every committee... Do not interrupt me, please. And you come here every committee meeting. You know the rules. You know that you're supposed to listen when spoken to and not yell back, because that's no way to have a dialogue. We've asked you to do that in the past. Let that be your first warning. You have 21 seconds to finish. Thank you.
So when you amplify your voice to stop those who censorship you from speaking out what's in your mind in the process of talking about our First Amendment and our 14th Amendment, every business selling marijuana, I'm open for it. I'm just worried about how you poverty pimps want to sales tax them up the ass to profit and kill people. Dumbass.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Always enlightening, Mr. Herman. So, any other questions or comments? And we've provided direction. Okay. Let that be the case. We'll be back in 45 days or so. Thank you. Item number 5.
Item 5, Councilman, this is a city attorney prepare ordinance as it relates to the establishment of a City of LA existing buildings energy and water efficiency program. There's also an associated CAO report which discusses the fee as it relates to this program on file, Councilman.
Good afternoon, council members. Jason Clean, Office of the City Administrative Officer. Before you today is a fee study conducted by our office to implement the existing building energy and water efficiency ordinance. The CAO's fee study was embedded into the city attorney's draft ordinance, and that's what's before you today. If you have any questions, staff from the CAO, city attorney's office, and Department of Building and the city are here to answer them.
Great, thank you. So we will go through public comment first and then open it up for questions or comments. And again, colleagues, this is a motion about creating programs to help us achieve the conservation goals we have set for ourselves. By 2020, for example, we seek to reduce our energy use by 15%. Those goals and the corresponding increases in budget and resources toward energy and water conservation are things that we worked on in the Energy and Environment Committee when I was chair. And so I'm pleased to be able to continue to work on this and have it in plum today. While the city has been a leader in establishing efficiency standards for new buildings, there is a need to get at the existing building stock. We know that half of the electricity demand in Los Angeles comes from just 4% of our buildings. When Councilmember Blumenfield and I introduced the idea of this program 2 years ago, our vision was that there would be a robust stakeholder process to ensure that our program would be ambitious but also achievable. The testimony today and the letters of support we have received are evidence that the process has been a success. I want to thank the Mayor's Office and the City Energy Project and the Department of Building and Safety for that successful process. I also want to thank our partners in the business and environmental community. I believe we will continue to work together on this program through its implementation. I believe that this collaboration will be good for both business and the environment. So with that, let me start off with Sam Neff, Maya Henderson, and Lisa Colchio.
Hi, I'm Sam with the bad handwriting. I'm Sarah Neff from Kilroy Realty Corporation. We own 2 million square feet of office space in the greater Los Angeles area. I'm here to offer our company's support of this ordinance. Benchmarking is a best practice we comply with in both San Francisco and Seattle. Annual benchmarking has saved us millions of dollars since we began this practice in 2010. We've reduced energy use 13% since then. It has made us more competitive in the marketplace. We do not find such ordinances to be onerous. We consider it to be a best practice, and we therefore highly endorse the passing of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was Sarah, right?
Sarah.
So, yeah.
Bad
Sorry, I
handwriting,
said
sorry.
Sam. That's Maya Henderson.
My name is Maya Henderson. I'm the Sustainability Manager for Kilroy Realty, and I'm here to absolutely second what Sarah Neff just said, but also as someone who
Can you
deals
speak
with...
closer to the microphone,
yeah.
please? We can't hear you.
Is that a little better?
Thank you. Yeah.
Also, as someone who deals with existing buildings and getting them through the LEED certification process, I can say that it's definitely useful to have our buildings benchmarked so we have the data we need to move forward with these processes, to not only know where we're starting, but to get them to be absolutely performing more efficiently. So we definitely support this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Calicchio. I'm a Director of Corporate Responsibility at CBRE. We are a commercial real estate services firm and globally, and we currently manage 2.4 billion square feet in the U.S. For the last 10 years, we've been benchmarking and tracking energy use in all of our commercial buildings through Energy Star. Today, we're benchmarking 2,000 buildings, and so we know it works, benchmarking and tracking. And we're here to fully support the ordinance on benchmarking and mandates for energy ordinance and water efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Walker Wells, John Howland, and Christina Angelides.
Good afternoon. I'm Walker Wells with Global Green. Global Green is an environmental nonprofit, 20-year-old organization headquartered here in Southern California. We had the pleasure of working with the mayor's office, their sustainability team, folks from DWP, building and safety, in developing this ordinance. In specific, we played a significant role in the stakeholder outreach. And I think the thoroughness and inclusiveness of that process is what led us to what we have today, which is an ordinance that has broad support, but is also a demonstration of best practice nationally in this type of work, and a reflection, again, of how Los Angeles is showing leadership on environmental issues. Finally, this particular effort is one of the items that's identified in the sustainability plan is something to get accomplished by 2017. So I'm excited that we're here looking at it now, and I urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Howland with the Central City Association. CCA is supportive of this ordinance. It seeks to have property owners track and understand their energy and water usage, and then make the decisions whether there are savings to be made by installing efficiency devices. It does not seek mandates. CCA supports incentives and other programs rather than mandates, and this is a good way to deal with these issues. The city, Hillary Firestone, and the mayor's office and the Department of Building and Safety are to be commended for the outreach they did on this issue and for their work with property owners to craft an ordinance that makes sense. We are supportive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Huizar and committee members. My name is Christina Angelides, and I'm the director of the City Energy Project at the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm here to express our strong support for the existing building energy and water efficiency program. Over the last 2 years, we have worked closely to provide technical assistance to the Department of Buildings in developing this program, and believe that the final result is a carefully crafted ordinance that will make Los Angeles more affordable, equitable, and sustainable. Reducing energy use and pollution from buildings can have a significant impact on our communities. Over half of Los Angeles' carbon emissions come from buildings, and about half of Los Angeles' electricity demand comes from just 4% of those buildings. Sadly, over 30% of the energy our buildings use is wasted. Buildings are also heavy water users, and saving water by improving efficiency in buildings is critical in our drought-stricken region. This ordinance will save building owners and tenants money on their utility bills, increase the building's value in the real estate market, improve tenant comfort, generate new local jobs, and create more equitable Los Angeles. We strongly support this and hope you will lend your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Marika Ardoli. Mabel Garcia Payne, Martha Cox Nitticum, or Whitcomen, something like that.
Good afternoon. I'm Marika Erdely, founder and CEO of Green Economy. I'm a woman-owned small business owner focused on energy consulting and construction. I believe the existing buildings energy and water efficiency ordinance is well written and will be easy to implement. As an Energy Star partner, I am very knowledgeable in Energy Star benchmarking, and it's a great tool in letting building owners know the energy consumption of their buildings. Auditing buildings identifies energy waste and also provides existing condition information so that efficiency retrofits can be identified. This new ordinance will create new green jobs in the City of LA. By providing Energy Star benchmarking information to building owners, they will receive valuable information on the water and energy efficiency of their buildings. Buildings that are energy efficient with higher scores will have higher market values, and lower scores will get building owners to make retrofits. Saving energy saves the planet. I hope the City of LA will be a leader in this area.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mabel Garcia Payne, and I'm a principal in the energy efficiency practice of ICF. A little bit about my company. ICF is a consulting company, and we have over 40 people in our downtown LA office who are experts in energy efficiency, sustainability, and environmental impacts to buildings. And so we've looked at, our local office has looked at this ordinance. We think it's a very thoughtfully designed ordinance. My colleagues on the East Coast who work with the EPA on Energy Star, we have a contract with Energy Star, and also with the Department of Energy with the Better Buildings program, which is City of LA is also involved in. We've all looked at it, and we really appreciate how thoughtfully designed it was, the collaborative stakeholder input that was implemented throughout the process, and we're fully supportive of this new program. In addition, we would also ask the committee to look at imposing stricter penalties for those who don't participate. The benefit of this is understanding how your building works, and if you're not paying attention, if you're not really complying, you really won't see the benefit of the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Martha Cox Nitticum, Building Owners and Managers Association. We have about 150 office building members in the City of Los Angeles. We are here also in support. You've already heard from a couple of our members, Kilroy and CB. The thing I'm most excited about with this ordinance is that it's actually going to be assisting those who don't necessarily have as much financial wherewithal and knowledge and ability to approach some of these benchmarking and know where the tools are. Many of our members have been doing this for years, and we know that they have. But this approach is more collaborative. It has DWP and Building and Safety assisting those owners who may not know where to turn. So I think it's a great ordinance, and we're really looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Ulrich, James Howe, Colin Tateshi.
Good afternoon. Jack Ulrich, representing the Center for Sustainable Energy. As a nonprofit working to accelerate the adoption of clean energy policies and practices, we strongly support the passage and adoption of the City of Los Angeles' existing buildings energy and water efficiency program ordinance. CSC looks forward to working with the city and other local stakeholders on the successful implementation of a first-class water and energy benchmarking program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm James Howe, and on behalf of the Luskin Center for Innovation at UCLA, I would like to express our strong support for the existing building energy and water efficiency ordinance. Even with California's stringent building standards, there is still a lot of low-hanging fruit that's yet to be identified in many buildings. This includes lighting upgrades, heating and cooling adjustments, and even air leakage, and that can be identified within building audits. The largest buildings in Los Angeles will report their energy use first, which creates the greatest potential in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It is also important to understand how efficiently a building performs, and much like you would know the fuel economy on your car, a measure of its efficiency, building owners should understand how their buildings perform as well. And having the ability to compare a building's performance with similar sized buildings can encourage the adoption of greater efficiency measures. Additionally, having city-owned buildings participate in this program as well will allow the city to lead in this area as well. This program creates a balanced approach to energy and water efficiency for all the buildings in the city, makes financial and environmental sense, and we urge you to pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Colin Tatiishi, and I work for the California Housing Partnership. We believe that benchmarking and retro-commissioning can help property owners manage energy, water, and operating budgets, but are also concerned that it will create additional administrative and financial challenges specific to rent-restricted multifamily affordable housing. We encourage this committee to emphasize the importance of Section 91.9708.3 time extension in the ordinance that is proposed, which is essential to help nonprofit owners of affordable housing comply with this new requirement. We look forward to continue working with you all to help the city meet its environmental and affordable housing sustainability goals. Thank you for considering our feedback throughout the process and for providing us the opportunity today to comment on this important policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Jaime Garcia is our final speaker.
Good afternoon. Jaime Garcia with the Hospital Association of Southern California. The Hospital Association would like to commend the City of Los Angeles for its vision and goal to lower energy and water consumption. Water conservation not only helps preserve a precious and natural resource, but it also helps contain costs associated with consumption, which is a win-win, which we believe. And annual benchmarking is an important tool towards achieving that goal. Hospitals are considered critical infrastructures. This requires hospitals to remain continually mindful of their infrastructure and to make appropriate upgrades as needed and within their program capital dollars. Hospital engineers are continually aware of their water and energy usage, which they balance against the mandated state regulations that involve sterilization of equipment and ambient room control, for example. HASC is concerned that the audit costs that will be incurred at the end of the day will not yield any new information that hospital engineers are not already aware of. HASC recommends that the Planning and Use Committee adopt language that factors the work currently undertaken by hospitals, which we believe meets the intent of the audit and retro-commissioning requirements. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Further questions or comments? Okay, so we'll move to approve the city attorney prepared ordinance and CAO report relative to the new fees to implement the existing building energy and water efficiency program. Any objections? Seeing none, so ordered. Thank you. Item number 2.
Item 2, Councilman, is a motion by Council Members Blumenfield, Wesson for yourself. It's instructing the Building and Safety Department and the Fire Department and City Planning and the Bureau of Engineering and the City Attorney to address several policy questions as it relates to an under-construction apartment complex that is located at the juncture of the Harbor and Hollywood freeways in downtown LA. Just so that you may know, subsequent to the release of the agenda, the Department of Building and Safety has released a report dated December 5th, 2016, which addresses some of those questions embedded in the motion.
Thank you. Staff here to report on this item?
Hi, my name is Shayan Akilan with Department of Building and Safety. Do you want me to just read up the reports, or do you have any questions?
So, Councilman, initially when the motion was placed on the agenda, I think it was as a referral to staff, but subsequent to the release of the agenda, the Department of Building and Safety has prepared a report. So it's up to you if you want to hear the report or refer the motion or keep the motion in committee. It's up to you what you want to do.
So we initially had it as we're going to refer the motion, but since the report is ready,
yes,
we could hear the report. Let me talk to Elizabeth from Council District 3. Are you here? Yes. What's your preference? This is Councilmember Blumenfield initiated motion. So
yes.
if you wish to hear the report today, or
I've read the report. It's up to you. I still have questions. Our office still has questions even after the report, you know.
Okay.
I understand they did answer the questions, and in terms of what's allowed per code, but we still had some other questions.
Okay, so you prefer that you want to hear the report and then you're going to have some questions for them to report back on, or?
I was gonna ask for a report back, not
Okay.
just from Building and Safety, but from BOE Fire and, I forgot the other.
City Attorney?
Maybe City Attorney.
Well, why don't we do this? If you could read do you have your questions already available?
I was just gonna make a quick comment.
Okay, we could do that then. We'll call you up first then, okay?
Okay.
If you could give your comments and then.
So, my name's Elizabeth Nenny, Planning Deputy for Councilmember Blumenfield. Thanks for hearing me today. In light of the tragic fire in Oakland, we think that the council member's motion is pertinent, especially pertinent. He introduced this motion to protect life, safety, and welfare of folks who live, play, and work in LA. To be clear, this isn't about preventing wood frame construction. The motion is just poses questions of concern and encourages to have a dialogue about multifamily housing as more projects get filed in the city and built in the city. So we respectfully request report backs from Fire, Building and Safety, Planning, and BOE to answer the questions outlined in the motion.
And so you didn't feel that the report adequately addressed the issues there?
Yeah, so I have a couple of notes on the report that I could ask now, I guess,
Okay.
if we have time. Or I could work directly with Building and Safety,
Okay.
you know.
Well, let's do that because we were going to, if you want to hear it in public, we were going to actually receive and file the report, so we won't have a public opportunity to discuss it. But if you, in the interim, discuss these questions with them, they come back and they can report to us in public at the next plum meeting, then we could probably, fully come to some more resolution around these issues. If you prefer it that way. So we'll continue this item instead of receiving and file, and we'll agendize it in plum next week, but we're packed next week, so.
Okay.
Can we wait till after the holidays?
I think so.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll just continue it for now, and then we'll hear it soon after that. Well, when's the next plum meeting after the holidays? What date is that? January
10th. January 10th.
Okay, so we'll continue this to January 10th.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right, next item number 10.
Item 10, Councilman, this is an appeal by the Windsor Village Concerned Citizens and Windsor Village Historic Preservation Committee. The appeal relates to the approval of a tract map located in CD4.
Okay, so staff here to briefly present this item.
Good afternoon, Plum Committee and staff. I'm Kevin Golden, City Planner and Deputy Advisory Agency. What is before us is an appeal of the decision of the Central Area Planning Commission sustaining the Deputy Advisory Agency's approval of the tentative tract map. The proposed tract map is to merge excess city right-of-way along 8th Street with the subject property, making the lot larger than it is now. The city's mobility plan, adopted in August of 2015, designates 8th Street as a collector street, requiring a half-street right-of-way of 33 feet. And presently, 8th Street along the subject site has a half-street right-of-way of 40 feet, 7 feet larger or 7 feet more than what is required by the plan. The applicant requested that the excess 7 feet be merged with the subject site. The lot area before dedication and merger is approximately 7,853 square feet. After dedication and merger, the lot area would be approximately 8,041 square feet. So that's a difference of 188 square feet. The tract map is solely for the purpose of merging the excess right-of-way with no new construction proposed as part of the tract map. Currently, the area is grass, trees, and a block wall with a wrought iron fence on top. The appellant charges that the tentative tract map approval and street improvement condition S3 IA violates the Historic Preservation Overlay Zone Ordinance and the Windsor Village Preservation Plan, and that the tentative tract map is not categorically exempt from CEQA. Briefly, I'll just go through the three main points and I'll wrap this up. The appellant's point number one is that the applicant is currently in proceedings before the local HPOZ board for the purpose of obtaining a recommendation for approval from the HPOZ board of a proposed apartment building, and that this should have been considered by the Deputy Advisory Agency approving the tract map. But staff's response to this is that the tentative tract map is to create a legal lot only. It is not for the purposes of approving or regulating any new construction. It is a separate case from the HPOZ review. As conditionally approved, the tentative tract map is in compliance with the city's mobility plan. It meets the findings required by the State Subdivision Map Act. The appellant's point number three is that the Deputy Advisory Agency's decision violates the HPOZ ordinance and the Windsor Village Preservation Plan. And our response to that is that, again, no new construction is proposed under this tentative tract. The tentative tract map is to create the lot that meets the requirements of the city's general plan, and the opportunity for HPOZ review comes when the applicant is ready to obtain a building permit for construction. The Windsor Village HPOZ plan includes guidelines that inform the site design of buildings, including building setbacks, massing, and orientation. These guidelines assure that new buildings are designed to be compatible with the adjacent historic buildings. Although the location of the property lines in this site will change as a result of the merger, the HPOZ process will assure that any proposed new building is compatible with historic site design, building, massing, and orientation. The easement merger is not categorically exempt, is the appellant's third point. And the merger, that staff response to that is that the merger and re-subdivision of the excess city right-of-way is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to Class 5, which is minor alterations and land use limitations. And we even doubled up on that by adding a Class 32, which is for infill development of residential structures that are less than 25 units. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say that we recommend that the Plum Committee deny the appeal and sustain the action of the Deputy Advisory Agency and the Central Area Planning Commission in approving TT 73037 and adopt the findings and affirm that the tentative tract map is categorically exempt from environmental review. But staff also feels that as a compromise, we are flexible with the improvement conditions in that it is keeping in the spirit of the HPOZ ordinance to not do any construction along the street. So if Plum chooses, they could sustain the Deputy Advisory Agency's decision and remove the improvement condition S3. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll now hear from the appellant, R.J. Strutz and Flora Bautista.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is R.J. Strotz. I'm the legal counsel for Windsor Village Historic Preservation Committee, as well as the Windsor Village Concerned Citizens group. I'm also a resident of Windsor Village, and as stated by Mr. Golden, he did, at the end of his statement, make a remark about compromise. We are willing to compromise on the findings of the Deputy Advisory Agency so long as Lorraine Boulevard, which is a historic street, is not altered. One of the conditions on the excess easement merger proposed by the Deputy Advisory Agency was that Lorraine Boulevard needed to be expanded by, I believe it was either 12.5 feet or 9 feet. If that condition is removed, We are not opposing the excess easement merger, and I believe Mr. Golden indicated to me in a private conversation that city planning was willing to waive the street widening condition. The reason we want it removed, the street widening condition removed from the findings, is that our preservation plan protects the historic streetscape of our community. Lorraine Boulevard is one of the narrowest streets in the city, and if the city requires as a condition that the street be widened, that would destroy the historic fabric of Windsor Village. And for that reason, we encourage the Plum Committee to dispense with that condition and solely to approve the excess easement merger without the street widening condition. And thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Flora Bautista, and I reside at 677 Lorraine Boulevard, LA, California 90005. I've lived in Windsor Village for 19 years. I am one of the named appellants and also a spokesperson for the Lorraine Boulevard residents, Windsor Village Concerned Citizens, and Windsor Village Historic Preservation Committee. I support the compromise suggested, which we'll hear from Julia Duncan, representative of Councilman Rue, that there be no street widening on Lorraine and that Lorraine be kept intact as a historic streetscape in order to comply with the HPOC ordinance and the Windsor Village Preservation Plan. I also agree that the excess easement merger along 8th Street is appropriate as long as it is understood that the above ground configuration of the street and sidewalk are kept intact, and as long as the fact that 800 Lorraine lot is gaining extra square footage will not be seen or interpreted as a concession by the city or any agencies of this excess square footage will be automatic grant to allow a larger building on the vacant lot, and that it recognizes that the HPOC ordinance and preservation plan should still remain intact and its restrictions on the lot coverage, setbacks, height, bulk, and massing of the new building must still comply. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the applicant, Elizabeth Camacho.
Good afternoon, council members. Elizabeth Camacho of Loeb & Loeb on behalf of the applicant. We are here today to respectfully request that you sustain the decisions of the advisory agency and the Central Area Planning Commission in upholding the granting of the tentative track map. As has been stated previously, the purpose of this map is very simple. It is simply to vacate the excess right-of-way along 8th Street. The sole issue that presents, of course, is whether this right-of-way is needed for present or prospective public purposes. Both the advisory agency, the Central Area Planning Commission, as well as the Bureau of Engineering, found that it was not needed for such purposes, and there has been no assertion to the contrary as far as we are aware. Any development on the site, of course, would be in accordance with applicable planning and zoning standards and would be subject to review by the Windsor Village HPOZ Board. As has been stated previously, the improvements to Lorraine and the widening of Lorraine is not part of the applicant's request. This is something that was imposed as a condition at the suggestion of the Bureau of Engineering. The applicant has no position on this particular condition. It is not requesting that be included. And again, it is not something that is part of our request or is necessary to mitigate any potential impacts. And we are essentially neutral on those conditions relating to Lorraine. We're happy to answer any questions the council may have, and thanks so much for your consideration.
Great, thank you. Julia Duncan from Councilmember Rue, District 4.
Good afternoon, council members. Julia Duncan, Councilman Rue's office. I'll try to keep this brief. As conditionally approved, the merger of excess right-of-way on 8th Street, as shown on the tentative tract map, is in compliance with the city's mobility plan. If a future project is submitted, it will be reviewed and under the purview of the Windsor Village HPOZ Preservation Plan, which regulates massing and orientation and addresses the appellant's concerns relating to density. However, Lorraine Boulevard does have unique 1920 shared street configuration portion. The current streetscape adds to the historical context and character of the neighborhood. The BOE required street improvement on Lorraine unnecessarily eliminates that shared street experience and imposes improvements that do not match the historic streetscape. Our office would recommend denying the appeal in part and granting the appeal in part so that condition S-3IA be removed. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm sorry, can we get that again? You're suggesting that, what condition you remove?
Condition S-3IA.
Okay. So that be removed and not amended?
Removed completely.
Just removed completely?
From
okay.
the conditions of approval, yes.
Councilmember Huizar, Terry Kaufman, Mesilla City Attorney's Office. So the action that that the committee can take today is to recommend to the full council that to sustain, modify, reject, or overrule any recommendations or rulings of the appeal board and make findings consistent with the provisions of this article in the Subdivision Map Act, which would be, if you agree with those findings that are in your materials, you would adopt the findings of the Central APC, which adopted the findings of the Deputy Advisory Agency. And I think the planners wanted to come up and make a comment about that condition.
Okay.
This is Blake Lamb with the Planning Department. Just to explain what removing that condition does, so it's condition S-3IA. The dedication is still taken by the city, but essentially the curb on Lorraine stays in the same place. So there would be no physical change to that portion of Lorraine Boulevard in front of the property. So you would be denying in part and sustaining in part the decision by the Central Area Planning Commission by removing condition of approval S-3IA.
Okay. All righty, thank you. So are there any questions or comments on this? Nope. Okay, so after public testimony and requested by the local council member, we'll move to granted part and deny part, and deny the appeal and remove condition S-3I.A.
So just Terry Kaufman, Mesilla City Attorney's Office. So just to clarify, you're granting the appeal in part and denying the appeal in part, modifying that condition, and then you would make adopt the findings of the Central Area Planning Commission, which adopted the findings of the Deputy Advisory Agency, I guess as modified if necessary to address this condition.
Yes, and we'll incorporate that into the motion. Any objections? Seeing none, so ordered. Item 11.
Item 11, Councilman, this is an application by Elijah Shashua. This is a hardship exemption from the city's baseline Mentionization ICO. It's for the demolition of an existing single-family dwelling and the new construction of a 3-story single-family dwelling in CD5.
Okay, staff here on this item?
I don't believe there's staff, Councilman, so there's just a representative from the council office.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a request for a
hardship.
hardship, so we don't have staff. We have a representative from Council District 5.
Yes.
Council members, good afternoon. Faisal Al-Sari here on behalf of Councilmember Paul Koretz. We would like to request your support for this hardship application. Careful consideration and outreach went into this request before recommending approval. We are recommending approval because we do believe that this is a true hardship for this family. This is not a spec developer, as been stated by some. This is a family that has lived in this neighborhood for several years. They originally applied for this application back in November of 2014, well before the current ICOs went into place. However, they could not submit all of the required materials during building and safety's plan check. Although this is typical and generally you are able to get an extension. They fell under the current ICO rules, which basically left them in limbo. And once we learned of this and we were approached by the applicant, we immediately reached out to the Homeowners Association on July 26th of 2016. We requested that their board take this up for consideration as well as outreach to the neighbors. The homeowners board, a homeowners board member sent out an email alert, an action alert, posted flyers in the neighborhood, as well as requested people to call in. From what we received more support than not, and only 2 individuals are completely opposed to this, primarily based on building. With that said, this is the only one that we are considering for this area, and we request your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dan Grossman, Karen Kazam, and Eli Shashali. You have a total of 5 minutes to present. If you want, and you think 5 minutes is not sufficient, 2 of you can take an additional minute after your 5 minutes expire. So it's up to you how you want to use your time. You want to all 3 present in the 5 minutes, or just one person in the 5, and then the other 2, or all 3 could do the 5 minutes, however you like.
I'll take 2 minutes.
The 5 minutes?
I'll take 2 minutes.
Okay.
My name is Dan Grossman. I'm the applicant. I'm the designer for the family, for Karen and Eli. They're living in the neighborhood for 16 years. I approached them almost 4 years ago. They went back and forth on design, and we finally submitted plans 6 months prior to adoption of the moratorium. So we comply by right with many requirements by the city for a new construction home. They are a big family. The mother needs to move in with them. They need a space. They apply by right, and we found ourselves wasting a lot of time with back and forth with the building and safety. The manager, the supervisor of building and safety recommended us to apply for hardship. We were ready to issue the permit, and the only thing that held us is the moratorium that was adopted while we were in the process of applying for a permit. But we submitted by right 6 months prior to the adoption in 2014. The moratorium was adopted on March 2015. I would like to consider the applicant. It's a real hardship. The family is waiting for years to build this house. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the applicants that I just called?
Good evening. My name is Eli Shashua. I'm the owner of the home at 1940 Kelton. I was the one that went through the process of trying to obtain the permit. Through the process, the city planning department and the plan checker himself continued with my application process. The day before the permit was issued, he realized that the time has expired, but he has signed 90 to 95% of the corrections of my plan check. So I'm asking for the committee to please grant me the permit to build my home. Again, I'm not a developer. I have my wife here and my kids. My mom is 85 years old. She lives 2 blocks away, and I want her to move in with me. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Karen Kazam. I'm Eli's wife. Again, I'm going to repeat that we've been living in this neighborhood for 16 years. 3 years ago, we moved out of the house in the same neighborhood to just start building our house, and it just didn't happen. We invested a lot of time and money towards the plan and to build our dream house. So we just, for 3 years, we're paying the mortgage, we're paying for rent, and we invested a lot of money in the plans. that's all. We're just requesting, for my family to live in our dream home for the rest of our lives. And we're not looking for any personal profit or any business to come out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go back to regular public comment. Yes, sir, did you had some time left? Any? Anything, sir? We need to move on. Okay, thank you. Galit Solomon, Mark Darnish, Pamela Pearson, welcome.
Hi, my name is Galit Solomon. I live on Greenfield. I completely support the project, and I think it beautifies the neighborhood. Some families grow and they need rooms for the kids. I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Darwish, live on Ohio Avenue, and I also as well support what the applicant is requesting. They have a growing family, and they're not a developer or a spec. This is not a spec home for profit. It's merely them, satisfying their growing family, and we support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Pearson, Eldad Solomon, and Eddie Soroff.
My only concern, having been exposed to these planning processes on both sides of my property where people circumvented the requirements, which by virtue of needing to change their plans to be compliant with the rest of the neighborhood, they actually required additional changes. So if the city is concerned about the planning, I hope they're equally concerned about enforcing and not letting these people take their plans and then submit them over the counter like one of my neighbors did and raised an entire house, and that was under the permit for a 300 square foot addition to the existing garage. So that would be my only concern, that it's a very large house for a very small lot, and I don't know if that's in keeping with the nature of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Eldad Solomon. Eldad, not here. Okay, Eddie Soroff. Sandra Soroff. Wayne.
Hello, my name is Eddie Soroff, and I'm a homeowner. I own multiple properties in the neighborhood, and I've been living there for 34 years. I've seen the area actually transform from single homes to two-story homes, and I think that's the nature of progress. I fully support the project, and I think that it wouldn't make a difference whether you let them build their home the way they propose to, as far as look-wise, because I've seen homes that have been constructed after the moratorium, and when you see them from the outside, they don't seem any smaller. It's just a matter of square footage. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Soroff.
My name is Sandra Soroff. I live in the neighborhood for 26 years. I'm in support of the project. I believe that it just adds value to the neighborhood. Families are growing, they need space, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne?
Yes, I went ahead, I looked at this project. You forgot in your report to put the footprint. The footprint is 2,700 square feet only on a 6,700 square foot lot. That's more than 50%. So it meets the current requirement, full in CD5. So yes, they got screwed. We must right the wrong. What is it, 4 years? Should have been done years ago. So normally, we don't like developers because they kill trees. But in this case, no trees are being killed. Nobody's being harmed. And what's happening is that Paul Koretz, who we call Peppa Pig, has to support the project. So unanimously support the project forthwith and give them back all their attorney's fees and 10% interest. Thank you.
I was tempted to. Thank you. Any questions or comments? And colleagues, as you know, just last week, this committee considered updates to the baseline mentionization ordinance. We considered eliminating certain exemptions which contributed to mansions sprouting up in areas that the community felt they were too out of character in their neighborhoods. There are other ways that we are controlling this type of activity or people's desire to have more homes more in character with the neighborhoods. For example, the residential floor area districts, of which there are two currently, one in Studio City and one in North Beverly Grove. There are historic preservation overlay zones, and there are the new R1 variation zones. And my question to staff, but I don't know if staff, oh, there you are. Staff is here to answer questions. Is this in the R1 variation zone? I don't know if you have that information readily available to you.
Kevin Keller, City Planning. Again, this item is not a planning item, but I believe since it is covered by an ICO, it is in one of our forthcoming variation zones. I believe, is that lower CD5? Maybe CD5 can remind me which one?
CD5 rep, want to come up, please? So it's forthcoming, right? The new R1 variation zones have been approved in CPC, but they're not fully adopted yet. Is that correct?
Correct. We have about 15 neighborhoods that are under development. We have the final 3 or 4 going to our Planning Commission this week, and we expect to transmit those all to the council early next year.
Okay, and they're not in place yet?
Not
okay,
yet.
So they're not in place yet. Okay. And in terms of the bonuses given to this project, what types of bonuses are given to this project, or what are they taking advantage of?
Excuse me, Councilmember. Can I just make a slight correction on that? So this is within an ICO area. However, we cannot say that it's technically within a variation zone because we haven't completed that process.
Yeah.
We also haven't completed the BMO process, and frankly, that's caused a great deal of uncertainty amongst community members, and so we definitely urge planning to kind of move forward with that, and appreciate all your help in kind of getting that sorted as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And in terms of the bonuses, do we know what bonuses this project is taking advantage of?
Kevin Keller, City Planning. It's hard to tell exactly on this. The current citywide R1 zones do include a series of bonuses for green building, front facade articulation, and a number of all the other optional opt-ins. Just a little foreshadowing, we are looking at revisiting all that bonus structure as part of our new zones that the committee will be seeing soon. But I would imagine it does appear that there may be some bonuses involved in this project of this scale.
Okay. Well, thank you. Just getting some background on where we are with this and the types of things we're dealing with as we're adopting our baseline mentionization ordinance. Okay, so I'll move then that we approve the hardship exemption at the request of the local council office. There was really no community opposition, so any objections? Seeing none, so ordered. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have public comment remaining on our agenda, and then we are finished. Robert wants to go watch the Cal-Princeton game on basketball. Right? Puppet. Huh? Oh, yeah? Somebody signed here, Puppet. And if it's you, come on up. I was advised by the city attorney I have to read out the names, although we know who it is. And
yes. So again, I appreciate giving people a break when they make mistakes.
Sir, this is about anything having to do with land use in the city of Los Angeles under public comment in the Plum Committee.
But now that the Dibble Dwarf is gone, we can talk like adults now. So I'm just saying, if anybody builds something and submits permits and pays money before the changes, you have to give them the building permits, or that's stealing. And you don't want to be stealing. No, you want to let people build, and if you don't let them build and they pay, then buy their land and give them their attorney fees. Like, for example, when you're going to pay me to leave the city, you're not going to do it by force, you'll do it by money, because money makes the world go around, yes, and the money keeps rolling in. Well, if I had enough time, I'd sing the song, but thank you very much.
Herman, and then Pamela Pearson. And let me tell you, Herman, you have one warning already about you disrupting this meeting, so just letting you know.
Mr. Chair and this Planning Commission, you already know what the master plan of the city is with gentrification. You've already heard of the fire in Oakland as a result of poor planning. I contributed to some of the projects you allowed to go unseen and red flagged off the record due to the transparency that the public requests that you send out to every warehouse that you allowed to become a studio and exchange to become a home and a residency of business for mixed use, that you have building and safety inspectors go revisit and check the conditions of all these facilities. You've created a horrible mess with poor planning, and now you obstruct me from speaking. And once again, I'm not amplifying my voice. I'm making a general statement about how fucking fools fuck up our city.
Oh, God. Any other items on this agenda?
Councilman.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more. I'm sorry. I was just so anxious to get away from that voice.
Can I just thank you all on the marijuana discussion? That was really insightful, particularly the banking issues with the federal discrepancy and the Colorado follow-up. I have licenses there. So please consider when you plan the density that in this checkerboard city, other cities may be coming over and imposing cost on our policing to obtain if they block them in their communities. An additional thing. So, now, guess what, guys? It's the gas line. I was coming home and I saw the gas company with two of their employees buried up above their head down under the street, a couple of properties down, because that gas line has ruptured as well. Coincidentally, it's the same property owner adjacent to my house, the big party, the 15,000 square foot party house that has installed, with the assistance of government employees, this illegal gas line. It's not permitted on my property. And
Thank you.
He's the silent developer on those two additional properties.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That concludes public comment. This meeting is adjourned.